What's going on, everybody? We have the meta snapshot for patch 13.14b. This is going to be mainly refining everything from last week. So as a bonus, I'll give you a couple different playstyles on how I would approach the patch based on actually playing the game, and go further than just talk about what comps are good and bad. So starting off in the S tier, we have Akshan Reroll, Ravenous, Warwick, Sorcerers, Deadeye, and Shadow Isle. It's just an Akshan meta. It is what it is. A lot of people are going to be going for this. Sorcerers are probably going to be the secondary comp, and then you have some bonus comps with like Ravenous, Warwick, and Shadow Isles. Deadeye is pretty much just an Akshan build. The Warwick build and the Shadow Isle build, you just need like specific augments for them to work, but if you do get them, they could compete with like some of the other S tiers. In the A tier, this one's like, you need just like really good start for them. I wouldn't really go for the A tiers unless you like just cannot go for any of the S tiers, but Jinx, Gunners, Noxus, Double Trouble, Challengers, Void Kaisa, Built Different, Ionia, Strategist, Tristana, Garen, Multicaster, Shurima, Kayle, and Riftwalker Kassadin. A lot of these, they're either really augment dependent, such as Riftwalker Kassadin, Built Different, Double Trouble Taliyah, or you need like very specific starts for them, such as like Noxus Reroll, Jinx Reroll, Gunners, they really want Piltover and stuff like that. Tristana Reroll, you need specific starts for it. But then some of the other builds, such as like Challengers, Void Kaisa, Ionia, Yasuo, Strategist Azir, they're playable. You could play them, but you really need to get those comps for free, because a full 2-star board of like all these comps in the A tier versus any of the S tiers that are 2-starred is just not even a close comparison. So when you do go for those, you have to like cap out your board really, really well in the late game. If not, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible to do things. Nothing's impossible, but it's just a lot more difficult to do. But sometimes you're forced to go into those other comps. In the B tier, we have Ekko, Karma, Zed, Rogue, and Demacia, and also Teemo. B and C tier, probably just like don't even try to play them. It's just not worth your energy. For the Legend tier list, I think Ornn's the best one by far. But Poro, Aurelion Sol, Vladimir, Master Yi, definitely all possible options. Some people really like Earth. Some people like some of the other stuff as well. But if I had to pick one like forever, it would probably be Ornn. Ornn items just average really well. And even if you lose out to some ASOL comps, like ASOL is just a comp where it's like you either win or you lose. One or the other. Whereas Ornn is a little more consistent. So that's why I think Ornn is S tier and all the other ones like A, B, or C. But of course, always refer to this paragraph right beneath. Your legend choice doesn't matter that much if you don't know how to play. And if you really do know how to play, again, you're still going to do well no matter which legend you pick. I think people get a little too worked up about like, oh, their favorite legend isn't high on the tier list or something like that. I'm actually going to make one other tiny adjustment to the list. But again, point still stands. Picking the right legend isn't going to magically make you a better player, and picking a worse legend isn't going to magically make you a worse player. But let's go on into the tier list. So Akshan at the very top, of course, is just going to be a 2 or 4 Deadeye build. 2 Deadeye is much easier to fit everything in because you could fit in 3 Shurima, which is really nice. You could just put in Nasus plus anyone else. It doesn't have to be Azir. It could be like Taliyah. It could be K'Sante. Literally anyone. If you do run Azir, Jarvan does give you Strategist, and Jarvan is just a good unit in general. In a lot of different comps, I just play a random Jarvan even without any synergies, because he is just that good. I mean, AoE CC on the enemy backline, there's nothing that quite hits as hard as a Jarvan just jumping all the way into the opponent's backline, and nothing feels worse than him jumping into yours. So even if like you have no synergies up for Jarvan, still like a pretty solid +1 for almost any team. And if you have like extra slots, you could always play Heimerdinger. Going something like Burn, Burn, Shrink is always going to be a good option. Sejuani is going to be your main tank, Akshan your main damage dealer. You could use all sorts of items on Akshan. It could be like any AD item works well, like Runon's is also really good. Pretty much like the sky is the limit. You don't have to reroll for Lysandra 3 or Akshan 3. Instead of going Akshan reroll, you could just play regular Deadeye. But if you do have the option to go for 3-star Akshan, it definitely is something to look into. Of course, 3-cost leveling pattern for this build. And if you want to check out the whole how to play section down here, you can definitely check that out in your free time at bunnymuffins.lol/meta, or you can check out the gameplay over here in the how to play section if you want to see me actually play a game with Akshan. But there are a lot of different options with this build with itemizations. I pretty much just slam everything just to preserve my life total at the beginning of the game, and I'll go more into this at the end of the video when I go through like how I would approach the patch in terms of playstyles and less so in terms of comps. Next build up, Ravenous Hunter Warwick. Only do this if you have the Ravenous Hunter augment, and this is just like by far the best augment. They banned augment stats, but there's this like illegal data site that's probably gonna get like banned soon. But like the data on Ravenous Hunter Warwick, to no one's surprise, is really, really good. I won't share it because I don't believe that I should be like promoting those types of applications or whatever if they're like not allowed, and they're probably going to be taken down soon anyways. But it's kind of just to confirm that Ravenous Hunter Warwick is indeed super, super, super good. And we already had this in the S tier last week without that website existing. So it's like, yeah, it's really obvious that it's good because you just play it and you just know even a 2-star Warwick you could top 4 with, and 3-star Warwick, you're going to be like getting like top 2 or top 1. To do this build, do the 2-cost reroll and just stay level 6 until you hit Warwick 3-star because he is the only thing that matters on your entire team. You play this the same way you would with like Riftwalker Kassadin, which is the other hero augment comp that I'm going to go into this week. But again, more information and gameplay are available on my website or the YouTube channel. I'd say the only important thing for Warwick is having a Quicksilver and a Bloodthirster. Third item, it could be like a Titan's Rage Blade. There's like a whole list of stuff you can see down here, but like Quicksilver and Bloodthirster, probably like the 2 most important. That's why they're kind of highlighted in orange there. And all the other stuff, like the set items, the Yasuo items, they don't matter. You just need the Warwick 3, and then everything else is pretty much the gravy on top. Sorcerers is going to be the next build. Sorcerers are pretty solid, especially if you have Sorcerer Emblem. I think this comp goes to like high S instead of like low S once you have the +1 Sorcerer. And that's because you could add in a Kassadin to give you Void and Bastion. It's really solid and gives you a lot of good tank line, especially on the cheap. And then in the super late game, you eventually remove the Kassadin, you play some legendary units. You could play like Sion, you could play Cassante. Obviously, Ahri's going to round out your team, Heimerdinger, things like that. So if you do have the +1 Sorcerer, you could either go 8 Sorc or drop the Malzahar and play one of those extra flex units because they're going to be really powerful for your team. Luck's going to be the main item holder. You don't need 3 items on her. You could always do 2 items and get the Radiant item from Demacia, but sometimes you don't have room for Demacia because a lot of the Sorc boards are hard to fit because you want at least 6 Sorcerer and pretty much never go 4. The difference between 4 and 6 Sorcerer is astronomical, so that's one thing to keep in mind whenever you're playing this. Let's move on into the next build, which is Deadeye. So Deadeye, very related to the Akshan build. As you can see, like they use the same items. In some games where you are hard stuck Akshan 1-star and you hit Aphelios 2 before him, obviously switch to an Aphelios build immediately. But other times you go for this Deadeye build is when you can't reliably get Akshan 3-star. So when you recognize those situations, do not slow roll on 7 and instead just level up to 8 and aim more for Aphelios carry. Do keep in mind, do not, this is a huge mistake that a lot of beginners make. Do not sell your 2-star Akshan to itemize a 1-star Aphelios. If Akshan is 2-star and Aphelios is 1-star, always keep your items on Akshan because he's going to deal out the most damage that your team can. And then only replace the Akshan once you get 2-star Aphelios because it's just not worth it until then. Urgot's going to be great for all those like weird items, like all the bruiserish items he can definitely use. So if you slammed like a Titan's Resolve early game thinking you're going a different build, Urgot can always use those items. And then main tank's going to be Sejuani and Sion, and then you could add in Shen for Invoker, or you could add in like a Heimerdinger if you really want. Remember how we said before that you could always throw in a Jarvan in any team? Well, the Shen could be a Jarvan 2-star instead also. Lots of things can kind of fly here. But the main power of this comp is going to come from just having Deadeye active. You want as many Deathblades as you can so that you can one-tap a lot of the enemy backlines. I find that having like maybe 3 Deathblades actually like one-taps the backline a lot of times. Having 2, it kind of leaves them at 1 health, which is why Runon's is really nice in Deadeye's because it's not so much for like Runon's being good, it's more so that like the Deadeyes leave a lot of units at 1 HP and then the Runon's kind of cleans up those units and kills them before they heal back up. Very powerful comp though. You want to do standard leveling for this and go for this as a backup plan for your Akshan build. Now onto Shadow Owls. A lot of people were asking questions about this on like when it's good or why it's good. Shadow Owl, you only want to play this when you have a Shadow Owl crest or like emblem, whatever it's called, or any +1 Shadow Owl, because putting it on Yasuo or Kai'Sa is really, really powerful. And then Kalista and Gwen pretty much carry your team. And then if you get Senna, that's just like the late game icing on the cake. What it does is that it buys a lot of time for your Kalista to just get infinite stacks on people from her Rage Blade auto-attacking like pretty much like 5 times a second. And your team just has like infinite shielding from both Shadow Owl and Senna. Another thing that's really good about this comp is when you run Ornn, So when you portable forge, you could get something called Trickster's Glass, and having Trickster's Glass on Callista is one of the most powerful combinations you can do because her spears stack when you have multiple Callistas. And imagine if you have your 3-star, you have 2 3-star Callistas at that point. But do note, I don't recommend going for this comp unless you do have the +1 Shadow Owl, so just keep that in mind whenever you're playing this. And it's also not a comp that you kind of force. It's similar to like the Warwick build, you only do it if you get the right starts for it. Onto the next tier, we have the A tier Jinx Reroll. Still pretty solid build. It's going to revolve around Jinx and Vi Reroll. And if you want to play a comp that's like kind of uncontested, this is definitely going to be the pick for you. It's going to be pretty much like any gunner build, except you just reroll Jinx and use her as a carry, and then use Vi as your main tank instead of Sejuani. This comp gets a lot better if you get Robotic Arm. I think that's the best augment on Jinx. I forgot what they're called. It's like the Zon mods or whatever. Maybe they're called mods, not augments, but that one is very powerful on her. But any of the damage ones will do just fine. You pretty much just need her 3-star and then you are good to go. Next build up we have is Noxus Reroll, one of my favorite comps so far, because it's just so incredibly powerful. The only trick is you need to hit this. So I would play this on maps which give you a lot of economy. So if you're ever on Scuttle Puddle, if you're ever on Glask Industries, this build becomes a lot better because getting a 3-star 3 cost is very difficult to do without any econ augments. So instead of getting an econ augment and wasting one of your augment slots on missing out on like a combat augment, the free econ from like the portal you're on definitely helps this build reach their super late game potential, which is 3-star Darius, 3-star Katarina, and they pretty much just eat everything up. There are very few teams that can deal with it, and a lot of teams, they need to rely on something like fight RNG of your Darius, like barely not one-tapping their main tank in order to beat you, which is pretty hard to do. But the weakness of this comp is not being able to build up Noxus stacks in the early game, so if you don't get a bunch of Noxus 2-stars, it's going to be really hard to reach a point in the game where you're able to roll down for Darius 3, Katarina 3, and you'll be hard stuck with like Darius 2, Katarina 2, with no Noxus stacks, and then slowly bleed out, and you don't like have enough time in the game to collect enough interest in order to hit them 3-star. So that's kind of like the push and pull for this build. It's definitely got a lot going for it. Once you hit, you pretty much win the game. But if you don't get the good starts for them, and if you don't end up hitting, this comp definitely falls off super hard. For items, Darius just likes any sword items. I like having one healing item. Bloodthirster is pretty much mandatory on him because it gives him the shield and it gives him a bunch of healing. But if you have healing from augments, you could just do full damage Darius. Same thing for Katarina, she just likes all the AP items, and then you just throw random utility or tank items on the rest of your units. So if you have like Shrouds or Zephyrs, this is really good for this build if you have too many items, because you can only fit like 3 items on Darius, 3 items on Katarina. So utility items are really powerful, or just tank items on either Scion or Swain, and you're pretty much set. Super fun build though. I can't count the amount of times I played this where I'm like 1 HP, but then I hit Darius 3-star, and then I work my way all the way back from an 8th all the way to a 1st, and it's just really fun. Gunner's going to be the next build. So Gunners are very strong because you are going for attack damage items a lot of times in this meta because you're going for Akshan. So as a backup comp, you could back up into Aphelios, but sometimes we just hit Zeri, so you could play this build here and just play the Zeri build. You don't have to play Piltover, even though Piltover is pretty nice, because again, if you flex into Zeri, you are not going to have any Piltover stacks. For Zeri items, don't worry too much about best in slot items because you're pretty much just going to put all your Akshan items on Zeri. So whatever you slammed early game, just drop it on her. You don't need these exact items that you see here, but Sejuani would still be your main tank. Same with running the Freljord. So you could do something like Sejuani, Lissandra, and drop to 2-gunner by taking out Jace and Jinx and slide in Urgot and Ashe instead. That way you get 3 Freljord, and you still maintain 2 Zon if the Zeri buff is good, and you still get to run the Legendary in Senna. I'm not saying you have to do this, but it's a different option that could work with this build. You don't have to play exactly that you see in the picture here, but both builds are pretty solid. But pretty much, you flex into this build from any AD start, and we'll get more into this after we go through all the comps. Next up, we have Taliyah Double Trouble. This is an extremely powerful build, and it's actually one of my favorites now that I've like tried it a couple times for real. I would only play this with Double Trouble Augment or with True 2s. True 2s, it's a little more difficult to do, but Double Trouble you could definitely just force this with if you have any sort of good items. So the way it works is Taliyah, whenever someone gets knocked up, she throws rocks at them. So you run 2 Taliyahs, they both throw rocks at that person. And then Set knocks people up, so he is going to proc that a bunch. So you just play 2 copies of pretty much everything, 2 Taliyahs, 2 Sets. As you level up, I guess you could play 2 Swains and 2 Teemos, but it doesn't really matter what you put in. You could just put in like a Scion, or you could put in like a Heimerdinger, it doesn't really matter. But the main core of the build is just having Taliyah with 3 damage items. The reason why you want 3 damage items and no mana items is because, again, whenever Set knocks people up, she throws rocks at them, so you just want to maximize that damage. So that's why you don't really need a mana item on Taliyah, even though it still could be built in a worst case scenario. Set's just going to do generic tank items. Ionic Spark is definitely much needed because it reduces the magic resistance of everyone, and then Protector's Vow gets him to cast much earlier, so it just gets you to throw more rocks at people. Redemption's just solid 3rd item, so that's why we build it on him, and then just like buff up your Taliyahs with AP. You could even itemize your 2nd Taliyah because 2-star Taliyah is still pretty nice. But this is just a classic 2-cost reroll comp, except now you could just only play 2 costs, which is really, really powerful. Probably one of the more fun builds to do right now, even though it's been viable for quite a while now. Challengers are a bit iffy, but this is just like the old Challenger build. You're going to be running Kai'Sa in the back line, Yasuo in the front line, and then Shen as your main tank. There are a lot of flex spots in this build, as you can see right here. We're level 8 and we have a Heimerdinger in, but the Heimerdinger could be almost anyone. You just want to run generic powerful units. This build definitely is lacking a bit now compared to before, but it's still decently playable if you hit them for free. Next up we have is Void Kai'Sa. If you get +1 Void, this build immediately becomes a lot better, and it's still pretty good. You could do Kai'Sa plus Rek'Sai carry, or Bel'Veth. Bel'Veth is really good, so it really depends who you get upgraded. If you want to go for a Rek'Sai reroll, definitely go for it. You would just want Titan's Resolve and Bloodthirster on her. And then for Bel'Veth, RFC, any other damage items like Edge of Night I think is really good, but pretty much any AD items, and then Bel'Veth's going to be popping a lot of people. I typically would only play this with 8 Void, but you could also go like a Bruiser build instead. Typically, I wouldn't try to play this without a +1 Void though, because it's impossible to get to 8 Void without it. And it's much more difficult to get to 6, and you have to run a lot of like weird units to kind of make that happen. But this comp overall is a solid option. You just can't play it that much. So obviously you want Earth whenever you play this because it gives you a higher chance to get like the Void emblem. But like, don't force this. Only do this if you get the game handed to you. Build Different is going to be the next build. I would only do Prismatic Build Different, like Gold Build Different just really isn't that good right now. But Prismatic one can be pretty nice. You just play whatever 4 costs you can hit, both tank-wise and damage-wise. So it's going to be like Aphelios, Kai'Sa, Zeri. Jarvan's going to be the main one. You could run like multiple Jarvans, and then like Sejuani, Shen, Nasus is all decent options. The only weird one's Gwen. Maybe don't play her, play like duplicates of the other 4 costs instead. But all these fit on your board without any synergy shared, so that's why we show them all here. And again, only try to do this with Built Different Prismatic. Next build up we have is Yasuo Ionia. Very similar to the Challenger build, except you just run Ionians instead of 6 Challenger. And this build is alright. It definitely does get outscaled right now, but again, if you get a free game of like Yasuo 2, Kai'Sa 2, definitely worth an option, especially with the Ahri in the late game, because if you do get an Ahri 2-star, you definitely can win a lot of games. It's just pretty difficult to do. Next build up we have is Strategist Azir and Lux, standard leveling here. Similar to the Ionia and Challenger build, this is like a comp of the past, and because of that, you only want to play this situationally. Let's say you're going for a Sorcerer build, like a Lux build, but you get an Azir 2-star for free. Those are going to be the times where you want to play this comp. In most other cases, you want to stick towards Sorcerers instead, but there are other weird situations. Let's say you're playing Akshan and you built a Rageblade on Akshan earlier, and then you get some of the Shurima units, but then also you only get ability power items being dropped, then you can pivot into this build as well. Those are just like hypothetical situations where you would find yourself playing this comp. But same build as from previous patches, standard leveling as well. But if you played in the last patch, you would definitely already be a master at this comp already. Next up we have is Tristana Reroll. I probably Tristana Reroll maybe once out of every like 15 games, I would say. I really only go for Tristana if I have a lot of copies of Tristana and Maokai at the start of the game. So if you have like 2-star Tristana, 2-star Maokai before you pick your first augment, that I wouldn't even say that that's like the best time to force this build. I want like even more than that. I want like 2-star Tristana, 2-star Maokai, and then maybe like a copy of Viego and Poppy. So like having 8 of the units total, because we have 3 + 3 + 1 + 1, That's going to be 8. Those would be kind of like the times where I would actually go for this comp, because it's like really hard to hit everything. And even when you do hit it, you're not guaranteed to like win the game at all. You need to be able to level up to get to 4 gunner and add in a Heimerdinger to really like cap off the comp. So it's really difficult to just win a lot of games with this comp. You could get some easy top 4s here and there, but it really depends on whether you believe or not, because sometimes it takes a long time to hit Tristana 3 and Maokai 3, and you need both of them in order to actually play the build. And if you don't get either of them, you're really just kind of screwed. So that's why I only play this comp if I have like a crap ton of the units, and pretty much ignore it otherwise. But there's a game replay here if you want to check it out. I'll be releasing another one of these over the weekend, so definitely subscribe below if you have not already. Let's get on into the Garen Reroll. Garen Reroll bumped up to A tier from the B tier, and it has a lot of potential because a lot of people are taking all the 3 costs out of the pool. So you could get Garen 3-star pretty easily because literally no one on earth is playing Garen right now. So if you do happen to get one of those games where you get good Garen items, and a lot of people are going for like Akshan, they're going for like Vel'Koz, Taric, things like that, try out Garen. You might be surprised, but you just do 3-cost reroll and then build a Rageblade and a Bloodthirster on Garen. You really do need these 2 exact items, but the rest of the items on the team don't matter as much. 4 Juggernaut's going to be good to get Garen as tanky as possible, and that's pretty much all you need to worry about there. Next build up we have is Multicaster Reroll. Same logic as the Garen Reroll, pretty much like no one's going for Sona, so you could get Sona 3 pretty easily. If you can get Vel'Koz, like great. If not, like no worries. But this is pretty much just a Sorc build. Instead of like going for 6 or 8 Sorc, you have 4 Multicasters. So if you are wanting to do like reroll and you get like a ton of Vel'Kozes as you're going Sorcs, you could consider going this build instead. Next build up we have is Shurima. I've lost a lot of LP playing Shurima. It's probably my favorite comp of the set, but it's very difficult to play because, not because it's actually hard to pull off, it's just because this patch they're just not very good. So mentally it's going to be pretty difficult to play this comp. The only time I would attempt doing this is if you get +1 Shurima, or even +2 Shurima, and if you get both AD and AP items, because that's one of those situations where you can like spread the love on your team, because Akshan can use the AD items, Azir can use the AP items, Nasus can use the bruiser items, and then Cassante or Sion can use the tank items. So you have a lot of different like carry options there. So if you're ever on the map Nox Cryo or like I think Unstable Rift, where you get a random item every single turn, this comp is pretty good because it's a comp that can use a lot of items and all sorts of different items as well. But standard leveling for that because you're going for 4 costs. Kayle Reroll. Kayle Reroll, it's like, yeah, if you hit it, great. You're either going to go 1st place or 8th place with this comp. There really isn't any in between. So if you go for this, it's up to the Kayle player and like the Fast 9 players to see who wins the game. But one of them will, and one of them will go 8th. So whenever you're playing a game and you see someone Kayle rerolling and another person playing Acel, just be prepared. Like, you're not going to go 8th, but you're probably not going to win either, so you kind of have to prepare for that. So just try to play for like top 4 whenever that kind of happens. But Kayle is only good if you hit early. If you don't, it's just like super, super bad. And it's super risky to play. So you definitely need high econ augments such as like Golden Ticket or like Tiniest Titans. That one probably is going to be the best one. And like feel free to take like multiple econ augments whenever you play this, because you really need to hit Kayle 3 and level 9, which is like 2 very difficult conditions to hit. Remember whenever we're playing like Tristana Reroll, which is the other 1-cost reroll right now, how many games when you're playing Tristana Reroll do you actually hit level 9? I barely hit level 8 when I play Tristana Reroll, even though level 8 is very necessary. But I don't even think about going level 9 whenever I play this, but it's pretty much the same comp. You just need a lot of 3-star 1 costs. But then in this one, you also need to hit level 9, which is it's so difficult to do. You need like a lot of econ augments. That's pretty much all there is to it. So definitely like play this with caution. Next build up we have is Riftwalker Kassadin. Ooh, I just played this on my stream recently, so we'll probably come out with that game sometime in the future. Really, really, really fun build. But as with the Warwick build, you really only care about Kassadin 3-star, nothing else matters. So make as much econ as you can during the game whenever you're playing those 2 builds. And just make sure that you get Kassadin 3-star or Warwick 3-star depending on which build you're doing. Because again, nothing else in the game matters. Once you get that unit 3-star, then you can worry about leveling up and like finding all the other units. But until then, just sack all your HP to build up as much econ as possible and get your Kassadin 3, and then hopefully get him rolling. Best build on Kassadin is definitely Jeweled Gauntlet plus Handed Justice. Third item, it could be either second Handed Justice or QSS or like a Hextech Gunblade. I'm not really sure which build is the best. It depends on the matchup. In CC heavy games, obviously like the QSS is going to be better. It gives you 100% critical strike chance when you have like these 3 crit items. But if you're not facing CC machines, then Jeweled Gauntlet and Double Handed Justice is going to be better. But honestly, just get a lot of gloves because those are going to be the best items on Kassadin. Next build up we have is Ekko Reroll. Probably don't worry too much about these B tier comps. Karma Reroll, maybe you could play this one a bunch, but it's a lot of risk for like not that much reward if you compare her to all the other 3-cost rerolls. Like if you compare Karma to like Darius or like Akshan Reroll, it's just not even a close comparison. But if you do hit it, like maybe you get like a 3rd or 2nd or something like that. After that was Zed Reroll. No one's really playing this. They just kind of nerfed it, so it's just not really that good anymore. But maybe they revive it in the next patch. Rogue Reroll, yeah, pretty much the same build. Don't play it. And then Demacia. Demacia Vertical has not been strong yet. I think 9 Demacia does well, but like, who's getting to 9 Demacia? 7 Demacia, pretty weak though. Don't even like try to go for this, I guess. But yeah, let me go over how to actually approach how to play this patch right now. So there are going to be 2 things I recommend, like 2 main strategies. The first one is just playing AD every game, attack damage every game. So you just try to force Akshan, and if you don't get Akshan, pivot into Aphelios or Zeri, and you just run 3 Freljord every time. So just get all the Freljord units, and then whichever attack damage carry you hit, just play it with those guys, because that's just going to work out really well. Because Ashe is a Deadeye, Urgot is a Zon, so no matter what, you can mix and match Aphelios, Akshan, or Zeri to complement the Freljords, and I'd say that'd be the primary way to play. The other way to play is to pick Aurelion Soul and just try to fast 9 every single game. You pretty much just make every econ you can in the early game, stage 2, 3, and early parts of stage 4, and then you save up for a big roll down at level 9 before you die, and then hit Ahri 2-star and all the other legendaries 2-star. The reason why you pick Asol is because Asol is the easiest champion to get levels with, and then once you get Ahri 2, you pretty much win every single fight. The only risk is that like sometimes you don't hit or sometimes you die before you can reach level 9. So that's why like it's a high risk, high reward strategy. But if you want to do it, you can. If not, just like pick Ornn and go AD comps. Like go for Trickster's Glass, go for Eternal Winter. Those are gonna be my go-tos. But pretty much any Ornn item is gonna perform like at least average, and the good ones are gonna perform way above average. So that's why the payoff on Ornn's really nice. And then the third way to play is getting one of those weird augments, like getting Ravenous Hunter Warwick, getting Riftwalker Kassadin, getting like +1 Void or +1 Shadow Owl or +1 Sork is really good, or getting like the Double Trouble Taliyah stuff. Those would be the other options to kind of go for, but it's a little unreliable. So you could go Poro and go for a Scuffed Akshan, and then if you hit one of those like really good augments, just like pivot into those comps and like change your whole game plan. But if you're just forcing AD, just like go Ornn. Pretty much all the Ornn items are pretty decent on them, and if you get like an ability power Ornn item, you could just go Sorks anyways. So that's why he's kind of just like that good right now. But those are going to be like the 3 main ways to kind of approach the patch, I'd say. It really just depends on what playstyle you kind of like. For me, I'm going to do the Akshan version, where I just force AD every game and play Ornn. It's going to be boring. You're going to go like third, fourth, or something like that. Maybe get like a 5th or 6th here and there. But at the end of the day, you'll probably climb. If you want to go big or go home, just play Aurelion Soul every game, or go like Kayle every game or something like that. And then like, I guess we could like try to have fun while playing a video game or something like that. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video. If you want extra TFT stuff to do check out the Patreon or OnlyFans, because we sort the comps by like S+, S-, A+, A-, instead of just like S, A, B, C. And also check out the coaching section to get coaching from Void Sin or anyone else on the coaching forum. But it's kind of nice to support other people in the community. But that's gonna be it from me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe.
And of course, smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.